what I did is I took the concept of this 12 spiritual principles to empower your worldly career. And I was watching something on, there's a network called Gaia, and they had a program about how we remember things. And what they did is they had two control groups. One group, they gave a list of words, right? And they had them memorize the group. And the next group, they gave the same list of words, and they encouraged them to put it into the context of a story or frame it in something that would be easy to refer to. So what was interesting for me was the retention of those words. I don't know how many, they didn't say it, but let's say it was 25 or 50 words that they were given a list of during a certain period of time, and asked, okay, write those names down, those words down, and they tested to see, evaluated what percent of those words were remembered. For the group that just looked at the list of words, the retention was only 13%. Not very much. But then when people put it in the context of an acronym or a story or something they could remember more easily and relate to, it went up to 93% retention. So then I shifted gears this morning and came up with an acronym, because so many of us, I mean, listen, who doesn't like to eat, right? If it's good, I see, I'm putting on my glasses so I can see. Is your name pronounced Jair?
It's pronounced Jair.
Jair, yeah. Nice. What heritage are you?
I'm sorry?
What heritage does the name come from?
My mother was born in Uruguay. I was named after a 1980s soccer player from Brazil, so I'm assuming it's like a Portuguese descent.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. And I will say during the session, if anyone has a quick comment or question, not that it should be a 10-minute statement, just because we're short on time, feel free. And then at the end, we'll allow time for questions and answers as well. So anyway, I came up with this concept, thinking we all like to eat when things are really nice. I was listening to an Istagosti discussion by Tamal Krishna Goswami this morning from 1985 in Dallas. He was talking about the early Istagostis that they had in Los Angeles. They had them weekly. At the end of the Istagostis, they had these Simply Wonderfuls, little white balls, right? They're sweets. And my first contact actually with the Hare Krishna movement was actually in 1971 when I was in college, and they were handing out these sweet balls at the time. I think in hindsight, I'm trying to think whether or not I thought they were too weird at the time, whether I took one or I just thought it was like full of drugs because they had to be on drugs, because how else could they look so happy, et cetera, et cetera. But I think I did actually taste one. That may have been the beginning of the end for me. But in LA, Tamal Krishna Swami said in the early days, they had these little discussions, these Istagostis, and they had a big tray of these Simply Wonderfuls. And then as soon as it was over, everyone started diving for those Simply Wonderfuls and grabbing as many as they could get. So food, Prabhupada called this the kitchen religion, and so many cultures revolve their activities around food. So I thought, hey, in life, you've got two choices. You can live in a bland, right, kind of context where all food is the same, there's no taste, all of that, your life is more bland, or you can add flavor. And that flavor today is going to be termed yoga. All right, so this is the concept that we're dealing with. And if any of you have ever felt disconnected, I know I have, or unhappy or lonely in any way at all, I mean, those of you with your images up, I'm sure we've all felt that way at different times. And maybe I can encourage you, Ritavaja Maharaj does that when he gives classes. Those of you that have not turned on your video, it's a lot nicer for the speaker if we can actually see what's going on. Thank you. Anybody else? You're certainly not forced to, but certainly nice. So we're going to go with flavor as a acronym. And this whole idea of yoga meaning to connect, it is a real challenge, because a lot of us, we think, okay, I've got my spiritual life, and then I've got my work life, I've got my career, and they're two distinct, separate things. And this is a problem. This is a challenge. And to integrate them, obviously, if you're convinced that spiritual life, a spiritual path, to whatever level we're able to incorporate it into our lives and our consciousness, if we think that that's the portion of our life which gives us the most happiness, I would call it heart happy as a phrase, heart happy. And we would call it throughout the day soul snacking. So you're getting little snacks of flavor throughout the day to feed the soul, feed the heart, and then the heart becomes happy. That would be, so soul snacking is the process, and then heart happy can become the result. Okay? So here we are, and what are some little things we can do? And this is not at the workplace, this is before we get started. What are some things we can do? On the way driving to and from work, find some things instead of necessarily tuning into the classic rock station to get yourself geared up. Jair, you're smiling again. So, think about replacing Jimi Hendrix perhaps with George Harrison, living in the material world, for example. Or Johnny Harrison, not related to him, singing with Willow. There's so many wonderful things. When I was first around the devotees, it was so minimal, the choices. Now it's incredible. So just think about getting that sort of thing to absorb your mind, and then don't think, oh my goodness, now I have to turn that off and go to work. This is what the session is about today. So let's go to the first one, which will be free will. Winston, if you could shift that. And actually, let's hold on a second. Let's go back. Let me cover. So flavor, we're going to cover today free will. We're going to cover life, which is, to me, equals learning to love. That's why we're here. Attitude. Gratitude is intrinsically connected to good attitude. We're going to talk about volunteering, okay, giving to others. Walt Disney even said that there are 3 human urges. And he said that one of them is to count or be needed. The other one, they all start with C. Count or be needed, to contribute to others, and third, to be in a creative environment. So we're going to tap into all 3 of those tonight a bit, because we're going to have to think creatively here to convert in yoga a spiritual consciousness within us to appreciate and be happy at work. Not so easy. Some of you are at work during the day, or students. I'm not sure what each of you do, but no doubt there are some ups and downs there. And then we're going to talk about organizing your time, and we're going to finish with relationships. So now we'll go to that first image about free will. This is one of the most striking paintings that Prabhupada inspired from his team of ISKCON artists in the early days. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, I'll go through it really fast. We have the 5 senses represented by the 5 horses, right? And they are wild. They're pulling in all different directions, right? That is what they do. Now, I have to say before I go further, it's not about stopping the senses from functioning. It's about turning them into a spiritualized place so that they perform yoga. Okay? So the horses are the senses. The rein is the mind, which the Bhagavad Gita says can be our best friend or our worst enemy, right? Also says the mind can be more powerful than the raging wind. Unbelievable. If you've ever seen even, I don't know, here we're in Texas here, so if anybody's seen a tornado, I've seen a tornado. That is what the mind is like. And then the driver, right? What is the driver? Anybody know? It's the intelligence. That's what the driver's job is. And you can see the soul in the back, right? The chariot represents the body. The soul is inside the body. And the soul is being carried by the senses, controlling, pulling the mind. And the intelligence is fighting. And generally speaking, in this material realm, the soul is a passive passenger. But what we're trying to do here is perform yoga. What does yoga mean? It means to connect. It comes from the word yoke, like when you have oxen, right? And the word religion comes from the, I believe, the Latin, if I'm not mistaken, religion, to reconnect. So this is what we're trying to do, right? We're performing bhakti yoga. This is the path that we're trying to be on. And bhakti yoga is merely the yoga of devotion. Every religion practices yoga. Every religion. We're just trying to practice the one that leads us towards love, right? And others have their leading to love also. We shouldn't diminish that either. There's a little bit more information in our path, which can help a lot of us depending on who we are and how we're wired. So that's about free will. I have to say one thing that I got from a recent Zoom class with a well-known ISKCON sannyasi about destiny versus free will. How we react to what happens in our lives is the exertion of free will. I'll say that again. So you've got destiny and you've got free will. This is forever debated. And he shared his opinion that how we react, our free will manifests in how we react to destiny, exerting its forces upon us. The karmic reactions, good and bad, from past activities in this life or previous lives, but how we react to that is the exertion of our free will. And that really, I mean, is so easy with COVID-19. Who feels like they're in total control here? Anybody? No. All right, let's go to the next picture. So this is, this topic is, it's the L in flavor and learning to love. So the quote is, seeing with the heart. What the eye sees is only a shell. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Only with the heart can one see the essential. So we're talking about seeing with equal vision. And this is called in Sanskrit samadarshana. And this is the concept of the Bhagavad Gita. One of the main thrusts of it is to bring us to the mode of goodness so that we can see with spiritual eyes and see the soul, see the equality of everyone regardless of their coverings. I always say, uncovering our layers to reveal that identity, that's the process we're in. And that one size fits one. You're going to see in life so many people, whether you're in a grocery store, whether you're talking to your mailman, your next door neighbor. Don't isolate. We shouldn't necessarily isolate ourselves. We're going to talk about association and relationships later, but it's really a challenge in this world, not to withdraw, because what does God or Krishna want us to do? He wants us to learn how to love him, but how can we love God without loving each of his children? And that has to do with plants, animals, people of different faiths, even people whose behavior, we may not take their association, but we should learn, like the Bible says, I believe, right? Hate the sin, not the sinner. Very difficult not to judge. How many of us can go down the street and not judge people? That person's skinny, that person's tall, that person's overweight, that person's old, that person's short, that person looks ugly, that person looks beautiful, that person looks arrogant, that person doesn't know how to dress, that person dresses well, that person looks wealthy, that person, they must smell, they look like they've been on the street for a long time. And if we could just learn to replace that with the consciousness of seeing the soul, we will be so much more elevated than we are. I mean, perhaps all of you are. I know I'm not. It's a big task ahead of us. I always, I have a bit of a vivid imagination, and sometimes telling stories to yourself at work may help. Let's say you've got some coworkers who are squabbling. You got a professor who's in a bad mood, who's reprimanding the kids. You got some kids who are just like, oh, I could care less about this class. They got crummy attitudes and all these things happening, right? And, I kind of tell this little story, which always puts a smile on my face. Picture Krishna, assuming we're all following this path that Prabhupada opened the door for us to follow. In the spiritual realm, glancing down at all of us, all the activities in Middle Earth, if you will, this earthly realm, and just shaking his head, you know, SMH, right? And going, oh, those children, they're at it again. And then he looks up and Balaram has run off. And he calls out, hey, Balaram, wait up, I'm coming. So to catch up, right? But this world is so full of so many activities by all these children, us included. So how can we, I was thinking today, you know, it's like there are dualities. We wouldn't know right if there wasn't left. We wouldn't know hot if there wasn't cold. We wouldn't know black if there wasn't white, right? We wouldn't know tall if there wasn't short. So we wouldn't know bland if there wasn't flavor. We wouldn't know sweet if there wasn't salty. So in one sense, being at work, I see Brahmatirtha Prabhu is on this call, and he wears so many hats in his professional career, from mediator, former geologist. We're honored to have him here. And I can only say that, you know, we wear so many hats, but how to see, I question whether along the path at a certain stage, whether we would appreciate our spiritual practices and our smarnam, our remembrance of our spiritual identity, we would appreciate it as much as we do if we didn't have to be, right, interacting along the way with the material energy. So that's the yin and yang of the situation. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, I'll look in a forest. There's, for those of you that have read some of Prabhupada's books, we know there's prakat and aprakat. Prakat is manifested. It's what our eyes can see. And then there's aprakat. For example, in Vrindavan, if one goes to the groves, we don't see Krishna and the gopis dancing in Ras Leela. We don't see it. But it is there, we understand, in another dimension, in another realm, and that would be unmanifest. Prakat would be manifest and aprakat would be unmanifest. So therefore, even in our daily lives, if we can use our imaginations a little bit, if we see some trees in a grove, doesn't matter whether it's in Houston or Dallas or anywhere, try to see, oh, this is similar. This is what was so wonderful when you hear Prabhupada memories and how people talk about what Srila Prabhupada would speak about on morning walks, right? He would see something in the material world, the energy, and he would be reminded somehow of something that he would spiritualize based on what he is looking at, because he saw with spiritual eyes. See? So this is yoga. Okay. Yeah, so nice, so nice. All right, let's go to the next one, which is going to be attitude is gratitude. It's tough to be happy all the time, but you can see that in this world, without that child looking unhappy, right? The one smiling wouldn't mean as much. If you cover your screen with your hand and you just see one of them, and then you switch to the other one, you don't see that duality. So there's duality even like, you know, you go to work in the morning. How do we say hello? How do we greet the people that we work with? If we're on a Zoom call, what kind of energy are we bringing forward to them? Are we uplifting? Or are we bringing people down? Usually it's one or the other. And it takes a little bit of an effort. There's no question, it takes an effort. But getting in those habits can really make a difference to the people around us. And what happens is we, on the other hand, we become the recipients, right, of that wonderful expression of caring and trying to uplift people. So, humility, patience, tolerance. I'm speaking to myself here, of course. Putting the pleasure of someone else ahead of ourselves. What does it mean when Lord Chaitanya's in the Shikshastakam, Trinada peace and Nichena, right? What does it mean, that verse about being more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree? It means that that kind of humility allows us to give more respect, more compassion, more kindness, all of this. And I think in our practices, at least again, speaking for myself, we take things for granted, we take things very lightly. We'll say in the temple room, all glories to the assembled devotees. And then, maybe we're bickering with someone. We're praising them, and then we're harboring some feelings like, oh, they took that last rasagula. Why were they selfish? I wanted it, or whatever. They're all the egos bouncing off one another. But I will say about a blade of grass, and this comes from my dear friend Garuda Prabhu, who said, he added something to that. He said, grass bends when it's walked upon, but then it stands back up in all its splendor. So if we are in yoga, if our hearts are pure and we're in a good, heart-happy place, because we're soul snacking throughout the day, right? We achieve that heart happiness of the soul. We're not worried about self-esteem of the body, but in the ego, we're worried about soul esteem instead. Then, it's fine. The blade of grass should bounce back up, right? Because that's the soul. It doesn't stop shining. It's just a question of which of those two options within the duality do we opt to identify with the body and the ego, or do we opt to identify with us as spirit, not matter? So, I always joke with myself a little bit, being an impatient patient. But we're all patients here, all of us. The benefit, I'd encourage any of you that, to beg Winston and Sarvabhauma Prabhu or Guru Bhakti, who host these Simply Wonderful Fridays. The benefit of doing this is not the chance to speak. The benefit of doing this is the benefit of preparing. Because for me, it's such an exercise to dive deeper and see what I need to hear and what I can possibly share. And if some of it sticks a little bit, then hallelujah. All glories to the assembled devotees. All right. Yeah. Something about judgment and compassion has to do with attitude. We have choices. Again, duality. We can go into judging, or we can go towards compassion. So you get into your school, your workplace, you're with friends. All of us have friends or family who are not necessarily as spiritually inclined as us. And we have friends and family who are more spiritually inclined than us, right? More advanced, less advanced, and the same. And we'll touch on that during the section on relationships and how to associate. But I can tell you it is essential to try and just remind each other almost, remind ourselves to put the mind at bay. The mind's job is to accept and accept and reject things, right? And it's always framed in that environment of judging others. Very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. We need an environment that's going to be peaceful, that's helpful to us spiritually, but certainly outside our little nest, which we have every right, to buffer ourselves and practice our yoga, But we should outside really be compassionate, really, really be compassionate. So here's a quote from a very well-known sannyasi in ISKCON, and he said, and this has to do with the mind. So if anyone's taking notes, I felt this was a wonderful one. He said, rationalization, right? The mind, when it rationalizes things, is intelligence in service to the false ego. Does that make sense? So when we rationalize things like, oh, well, I did this, but it's okay, because he did this to me, and I'm going to do this, and that person didn't do this, so I'm going to do that. So that would be an example of rationalizing. So this is using our intelligence but that intelligence is serving the false ego, and it manifests as rationalizing. What would be the opposite? Being compassionate, being kind, being encouraging, being generous, being warm, and ultimately being loving. Prabhupada set this up. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, "Let me not desire anything but the highest good for my worst enemies." Biblically, this is turning the other cheek. Not expecting praise for oneself. Right? I'll repeat that quote. What does a service attitude really mean? Putting others first. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada's Guru Maharaj said, "Let me not desire anything but the highest good for my worst enemies." If you go on YouTube and you look for Bhaktisiddhanta quotes, they're there. It's really wonderful. What did Prabhupada do for one of the most kind, compassionate disciples of his with the best attitude? It was Jayananda. He worked, he coordinated the Rath Yatras, he contributed money in the early days. He passed away from cancer. Prabhupada said, because of his true service attitude, he put Jayananda Prabhu's picture on the Rath Yatra cards. As long as in ISKCON we're doing Rath Yatras, his picture will be there for hundreds of years, if not longer. Pretty astounding. So Prabhupada was very clear on service attitude first. It wasn't who's wealthy. He didn't put, the Beatles picture on the Rath Yatra card. They did wonderful service, but that humble soul, Jayananda Prabhu, his picture on the Rath Yatra cards. All right, this is an important thing, and then we'll move to the next one. In Vedic India, we're going to talk about historically in Vedic India a little bit. Because when Prabhupada started the movement, as we know, he created a society of just monks and nuns, essentially. Single people, nobody was married hardly at all. There were no children, and everyone lived communally. And Tamal Krishna Goswami and that Istagosti I was listening to this morning was talking about LA in 1969, and they had, the ladies shared a room that was like 14 by 14 feet, and there were 14 women, single women in there. And then there were like 50 or 60 men in a room 2 or 3 times bigger. They had little cubby holes for their clothing. The men had 2 showers for 40 or 50 men, 2 toilets. They went out on Harinam till midnight. Their morning program started at 7 a.m. It was a whole different schedule and mood in those early days. But that was not proved not to be sustainable, right? So the fact is, in Vedic India, the truth is that there were farmers, there still are, there are farmers, merchants, doctors, politicians, military people, street cleaners, and then there are also priests. What percentage of the population are priests? Maybe less than 1%. Now, in a movement like the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, right? Then we're going to go to that next slide in a minute, so don't get too distracted. We're almost there. This is the longest discussion because it's about attitude. This is a long one, Winston. So the bottom line is, it just, we want to raise our consciousness and help each other to lift ourselves up to the mode of goodness. That's the lesson of the Bhagavad Gita. But most important is along the way, just be humble and respectful of everybody. Everybody. It's like saying, yeah, thanks. It's like saying, I've been a vegetarian for a year. You just ate a hamburger yesterday. Or I've been, vegetarian for 46 years and you just started a year ago. I mean, we've been around spiritually for a lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. We should never feel that we're so special. We should feel very, very tiny. Prabhupada is a very famous thing where he was speaking with His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami, my Guru Maharaj, and said, you know, there's this big universe, and out of this big universe, there's a galaxy we call the Milky Way. And in the galaxy, right, there's one solar system with this sun planet. And then of that galaxy, of all the planets, there's planet Earth. And on planet Earth, there's all these continents. And on these continents, there's one North America, right? And in North America, there is, there's, one city called LA. And on that city, there's one La Cienega Boulevard, or Watsika, right? That's where the temple was located. I guess La Cienega at the beginning, in the early days, and now Watsika. But and in that, there's all hundreds of people coming and going in buildings, and there's one little person named Tamal Krishna. That was Prabhupada speaking. Because Prabhupada's service was to keep everybody on track performing yoga. And I know Tamal Krishna Goswami, he told me once, he said, Yudhisthira, you are the most incompetent appearing person I have ever met in my life. And, he recruited me because I had certain managerial skills. So he said that, I'll never forget it. And, it was a dose of humility, for sure. It was great. I mean, I relish that he said that to me. You're the most incompetent, competent appearing person I've ever met. Very funny. All right, let's go to the next slide. Volunteer. I think we're doing good on time. All right. I think somehow or other we have to see everything we do in the sense of volunteering, because we have a choice of giving of ourselves, that extra bit, being kind or being grumpy, being compassionate or being judgmental, being unhappy or spreading cheer, right? We have the option of giving to others without expecting anything in return, lending a helping hand, putting others first, all of these things. We have these options. That is volunteering. I mean, I think we have to realize that. That is volunteering as much as going to, whether it's a temple to serve out the Sunday feast, or volunteering at a homeless shelter, or a Food for Life program, or wherever we may go, whether we're a social worker, or somebody serving the community at large, or a doctor doing service, going the extra mile to helping a patient feel better who's suffering, right? Or a lawyer who can volunteer their services. Why isn't it also considered volunteering just that we go the extra step to be kind, compassionate, understanding, patient, respectful, encouraging, where we're trying to uplift rather than either be neutral, where we're trying to connect and be kind. I mean, let's do an exercise, Everyone, just, even if your camera's not on, just look at Jair. See his smile. He's got like a perfect smile. So just smile. Just smile. That's all. Sham Sundar Prabhu, Haribol. Nice smile. And feel as if it's the soul, it's the super soul and your soul that are coming through into that smile. Me, when I do it, because I think I don't smile that much, I get goosebumps. I don't know anybody else. Don't you feel a little energized when you do it? I mean, it's a fact. We've only got a half dozen of us who dare show our face, but I hope the others are trying to smile while we're sharing this. So there are 3 phrases that I read the other day that I think are very important, and we can't say it enough. They are please, thank you, and instead of saying you're welcome, say my pleasure. That you're doing something for someone with pleasure rather than you're welcome, which is kind of like, what does that mean anyway? What does that mean? You're welcome? You're welcome to ask me to do something again for you? It's just a little convoluted. But my pleasure is a very direct statement saying to yourself, affirming that we are doing it for that person. So we're talking about how to convert the workplace, right? whether you're a student or you're at your job or with your friends, whatever, you're exercising or you go to a yoga class or whatever, how to help uplift rather than the opposite. So, and the other thing is, and I just want to share this because it's so important, there have been studies that show what is the one word that human beings in general want to hear the most, that's most pleasing to them. I don't know if anybody knows. It's one word. And for us, we may say, we may like nudge it a little bit and say Krishna, right? But, or God. But the one word is our own names. That's what people love to hear. It's encouraging to us. Why do we need that kind of encouragement? I'll tell you why. Because we don't belong here. We're inherently insecure in this world. When the soul, when the jiva falls into this world, it says the first thing that happens is the false ego, the material ego, encapsulates the soul. It's like an egg, but it's not an eggshell that's really soft. It's a very secure surrounding for that soul, because the soul is very, very much like a fish out of water. It is not supposed to be here. It's not. This is not a real place for the soul. It's not. So we should, just with that, we think, gosh, we're seeing people who are struggling. They're struggling in their friendships. They're struggling with their children. The kids are struggling with their parents. The wife is struggling with the husband's struggling with the wife. They're struggling with their taxes. They're struggling with business. They're struggling with the IRS. They're struggling with the law. They're struggling with mental health. They're struggling with someone who's abusive. All these struggles that are so common in the material world. So the soul is just really, really out of place. This is why, when you're a kid, this was me when I was a kid, when I was 10, 11 years old. People said, what did you want to be when you grew up? When you grow up? And my mantra was, I just wanted to be happy. That was it. I didn't say I want to be a lawyer, or a doctor, or a businessman, or a street sweeper, or a politician, or an engineer, or a farmer, or anything. I just want to be happy. It was this vague kind of answer. But that's the goal of the soul. The soul is pleasure seeking. The soul eternally is Sat Chit Ananda. It is full of knowledge. It is full of bliss. And it is eternal. So let's go to I just say about volunteering, be generous with our words. Be generous. That's volunteer work. You're volunteering words of kindness and compassion, to be generous like that. That's volunteer work. You're not getting paid to say, hey, Sarvabhauma Prabhu, you were in the Istagosti that our Guru Maharaj was speaking about today. And he was praising you for being doing, fundraising as a service for the temple, right? In those days, in the early 80s to the mid 80s, and 5 years straight. And he appreciated you in that Istagosti, that group discussion in Dallas. He did. Now, I didn't have to say that, but inevitably, Sarva Prabhu is one of the most humble souls I know, but that's encouraging to him. There's nothing wrong with that. In ISKCON, sometimes we're like, oh, Prabhu, I'm the lowest of the low. We'd use this self-deprecating pattern of speech. What's the point? What's the point? It's not the material ego that we're trying to nourish. Shyam Sundar works in his garden. Shyam Sundar, right? What do? You're feeding the roots. You're thinking, I know you well enough, you're thinking in meditation, there's a soul inside this plant. Let me nourish this lovely plant. One at a time. Right? And if it's flowers, it's being offered to the deity. If it's vegetables, it's being offered in prayer through a meal being prepared, and it becomes mercy, prasadam, right? That is a service in and of itself. Just remembering to be kind, remembering that God exists, remembering that there's super soul in the heart, that is an act of service. The 9 processes of devotional service are right? What are they? Shravanam, Sarvabhauma? The 9 processes, this is the interactive part of the session. 9 processes of devotional service, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smarnam, right? The first 3. So Smarnam, that third one, is just remembering. It's volunteer service to God. It's yoga just by remembering that, oh, John Smith over there in that cubicle is a spirit soul. That is called soul snacking. You're feeding your soul by engaging your mind and your senses in smarnam, in remembering. I had a godbrother tell me, Yudhisthira, you did so much service and I didn't do so much and all this. And I jumped right on it and I said, no. I did the service that was appropriate for me, but has there been a day in the last 30 or 40 years that you did not remember Krishna? And he said, no, I remember, every day. I said, so that is voluntary service. That is. Prabhupada appreciated the services that were rendered by his disciples and followers to him. He was very, very human like that. Very, very. All right. Let's go to the next slide. Well, let's read this from Radhanath Swami real quick, because it may not be easy for all of you. So first at the top is be the change, volunteer and make the difference. Radhanath Swami, and this is interesting, I Googled, right, images of volunteer service attitude, and Radhanath Swami quotes and Prabhupada quotes came up all over the place. I was very pleased. Radhanath Swami quote, our humble service attitude in our life is what determines what effect chanting will have on our consciousness. Chanting, for those who may hear this, who are following one faith or another, singing the glories of God. He says, otherwise we can be chanting, singing, right, for millions and millions of births before we actually achieve the goal. So, humble service attitude. Service, generally speaking, is voluntary. So that's why I love the V, flavor. Free will, right? And then it goes down to voluntary. And then traditional leaders, if you're in management, servant leaders. If you're not familiar with it, look up servant leader. And you'll get a whole slew of information about that, Traditional leaders believe that employees support them. Servant leaders, they support and serve others. One style of management that always makes me laugh, I guess I'll say it anyway, there are all sorts of styles of management, right? The style of management you do not want to be is the seagull manager. The seagull manager is the manager who is flying out at sea over the water, right? Like the owner of a business or the manager of a department or CEO or whatever, right? And then they come in and they just defecate. They poop all over the heads of all the people who are on the shore. They come to the beach just to let it go, and then they fly back out again. So if you have a manager like that, you got your work cut out for you to be extra, extra kind and encouraging and all that, and maybe you can turn them around. But there are people like that, as we all know. Servant leaders, those are the ones who are most successful. Let's move to the next slide. This is about time. It says time is more valuable than money. You can get more money, but you cannot get more time. Here are a few statistics. If we spend 7 hours sleeping, that's 30% of our lives. Another 10 hours if we work, right? Preparing and going to work, like commuting, 8 hours at work, that's another 42% of our lives. And another 2 hours for caring for the body, showering, right? Using the restroom, preparing to eat, all of that. That's another 8% of our lives. So that leaves 20% maximum for everything else. But if we, do other things like, we're got to clean where we live, go shopping, filling up the car with gas, meeting friends, walking your dog, whatever, watching a movie here and there. Some of us do that, gosh. Time is the biggest gift. It's interesting. Per day, we take between 17,000 and 30,000 breaths. How many of those breaths are used in soul snacking? Being kind, being generous, being compassionate, being encouraging to people around us, uplifting the spiritual energy of the environment that we're in, being good like that. Very, very important. If we perform yoga in our activities, consider how much time we gain, how we're using that time. Finally, in this topic, and then we'll go to the last one, efficiency in communications. Tamal Krishna Goswami told me this because Prabhupada told him that, and it is to be responsible means to respond. So for those of you, I can tell you, try and fight against material procrastination, get things done, use your time well. If someone communicates with you, show responsibility and respect for them by responding promptly. Very, very important. I learned this from my Guru Maharaj. Prabhupada taught him. Very, very important. Time is scarce. It's the most valuable thing we have. I'm blessed to live in a nice house just north of Dallas. And there was a worker when we moved here not that long ago, and he's about 30 years old. And clearly he didn't have the money for that house, right? And I said, you know what? I'll give you this house. I'll give it to you. No charge, nothing. He's 30 years old. I'm 67. But I said, I get to become 30 and you get to become 67. So he did not accept the house as a gift. He would not do that trade. So time is more valuable than money. Let's go to relationships to finish up. I believe in one thing, this is Albert Einstein, that only a life lived for others is a life worth living. Again, service attitude, giving, compassionate, kindness, encouragement. Anything you can do to help others meet their need for connection also helps you. Tamal Krishna Goswami, one of the first letters that he wrote me, he said, I thanked him for, meeting with us and encouraging us and all that. And he said, actually, I take just as much pleasure. He said, it's like sugar cane. It's sweet on both ends. So giving is receiving, and receiving is also giving to the giver. So as far as relationship goes, again, yoga means connection. How many gurus do we have in our lives? We have teachers of all different kinds. You can learn by looking at a tree and how it's reaching towards the sun, right? You can learn by the loyalty of a dog to its master and the love that it gives. You can learn by the loyalty of birds that mate for life in their domicile. You can learn by the one who always steps forwards to serve others, whether it's at a feast or whatever. They just step forwards rather than the first people to sit down and want to be served. So many things we can learn by others. And these are our teachers. It's not just some sannyasi spiritual master. We have so many teachers around us. So association is very, very important. Very, very important. I just want to say so, so important. And we can take association both directly, physical presence. This pandemic has been challenging for a lot of people. A lot of us lost association, but we also gained because we got on Zoom, which will be a way to connect broadly. So I encourage people to do that. Worldly dealings, one of the most challenging things is that, association can either lift us up or bring us down. So we have to be mindful, really. If somebody's going out and you're at a job and they're going out to a bar or a restaurant after work, sometimes you might get drawn into a social setting, but it's also an opportunity to, have a baked potato and a salad and let somebody ask you, and say, well, it's healthier, or you can have my share. I would always say at conventions, you get my share. No worries, and just let it go because goodness gracious, in our last life, who knows what we were eating? Earlier in this life, who knows what we were eating? It's not that we should be proud just because we're vegetarians. The 6 loving exchanges, most of us know this, but giving and receiving gifts, speaking to someone confidentially and hearing confidentially, and offering of food, right? And obviously spiritualized if at all possible, at least through silent prayer, if not more, and receiving. So maybe it's at work and getting, maybe you can't bake cookies, but you can buy them from Govinda's at the temple in Houston or here in Dallas, and you can bring them to work and distribute some cookies. Why not? Prasadam is purifying. I spoke with my godbrother, Priyavrata Prabhu. He's the global director for Food for Life. They reached 7 billion meals served. 7 billion around the world since Prabhupada first came to New York in 1965, 66. 7 billion. So I like to just finish with 2 quick things. This is not a teaching moment. This is not a preaching moment. It's a sharing moment. That's the main thing. I think we're gonna skip, well, we can go to the last slide if you want. Because we do have these, we did name it the 12 things, and we'll just race through them a little bit. But we just have to really believe in our hearts, we're not better than anyone else. We're all spirit souls. We're all in this mess together called the material world. And Tamal Krishna Goswami, ending with a little comment, was asked to spiritually help someone by a godbrother. And the godbrother told him, he explained that this person has got, wow, big problems, right? And someone may have reacted by saying this person's going to be too difficult and not offered to help them. They just thought they were too far gone, this person. And Tamal Krishna, somebody talked about Tamal Krishna Goswami in this situation. And he said, I think it was Burijan Prabhu in his Prabhupada Memories DVD video on YouTube. And he said, Tamal Krishna Goswami said, but that's not the whole person. So he saw past the challenges that that person had. So time, the 12 principles here, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. Time, so important. The mind, man, we just have to direct it towards good and not towards this whole rejecting and judgmental thing. Who's in control? This pandemic has taught us a lot. We are not. Humility, patience, tolerance, such important qualities. Compassion, kindness, service, attitude. Learning moments. We can learn from everybody something every day. Every day. Even if it's the opposite of what we want to imbibe, we see, oh, this is the duality of the material world. That person's grumpy. That person's happy, like those 2 little babies. We have the picture, right? So we can learn from that person. Association, seeing the various gurus, teachers in our lives, that our words are important. Then we should see through the eyes of teachings, scripture, Bhagavad Gita, see things in perspective, tie it spiritually. That we should see our senses like those horses pulling us out of control and try to spiritualize them. Use our eyes to be reminded of God. Use our sense of smell to be reminded of the fragrance that may exist, in a holier place than our office. Right? Maybe somebody has flowers there, and we can be reminded, right, of the flowers in Vrindavan. We can hear when you get a little break or you go outside, put on a little tape, or just, quietly chant the Maha Mantra to yourself. This Maha Mantra is coming from the spiritual world. We should feel like it's like a conduit to eternity. It's very, very powerful. Whenever we're chanting, if we can get our mind focused on appreciating the energy and the purity and the power of this Maha Mantra, very powerful. And ultimately, the goal is to bring ourselves to love. That's all. That's what Krishna, that's what God, Radharani and Krishna, that's what they want. We're wayward children. What does a parent want ultimately? They want to feel the love of the child. They're giving unconditional love. When the child comes up and says, Mommy, Daddy, right? Mama, Papa, Pita. What does the parent feel? This overwhelming joy. So we want to come to the platform of loving not just the deity form of Krishna, not just God abstractly, but also all of our fellow spirit souls. So we're going to stop here. Then we can go to the first slide with the topic and then ask if anybody has any questions or answers. We go for 10 minutes maybe, or not.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I just wanted to emphasize how important the initial comment that you made at the beginning of this presentation regarding stating secular life versus spiritual life. I had an issue with it a couple months ago, maybe even a couple weeks ago. And it's not like you can just take off one hat, put on the other, and then act like you're somebody completely different. Inside, deep down inside, something was really killing me and bothering me. And I knew that it was that lack of genuinity that I wasn't being consistent throughout my life. So I eventually threw away, the idea of having hats, and I just stuck to this. And it was very important not to have that line drawn in my head or in the sand in order to distinctly try to pick one or the other.
It's a big challenge, but so important. So important. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? And thank you, Jair, for your smile. It is wonderful.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Prabhu.
So I have one question and a comment. The comment is, rather than comment, is an appreciation that, one of the slides you put about Einstein's quote about, life living for others is the life, is the life, lived actually, or is worth. So that's really great. I can theoretically appreciate that. Hopefully, I have more practical appreciation in future, but can definitely appreciate that. Very nice quote. The other thing, the question I had was, you mentioned about that one word everyone likes to hear is their own name. And after that, you made a comment about that, reasoning that that we are insecure in this world. Can you elaborate more to make that connection and understand that part a bit more?
Yeah, I could have gone a little further. Thank you for asking. To me, what we're trying to do in the metaphysical New Age world, they call it light workers, because we have the light of the spirit soul shining through, right? The light of knowledge, the torchlight of knowledge, as Prabhupada would translate it, yeah. Shining through. So we're blessed to have at least some little bit of awareness, right? We know Aham Brahmasmi, we're not this body. That's a blessing. That's a blessing. Just that simple point, right, is one of the things that attracted me way back when to this philosophy. So my point is that people are encouraged to go further along the path by relationships. And that's it, So if we encourage them, even if it's their material ego a little bit, that they're responding to when we say their name, there's no harm. There's no harm. It's actually a good thing, because then they'll start trusting. Then maybe they'll ask one day, how do you, oh, I like those beads. What are they? Or why are you vegetarian after all? And it may take 5 years before they ask. But that's where patience comes in. How patient is God? How patient is Radharani and Krishna with us? Now, when I speak like this, obviously I'm speaking to myself. It is an absolute blessing to be able to prepare to do any sort of presentation like this. Because this may last 1 hour, but I may have put in 30 hours meditating on it, or 40 or 50 more. Because it's just, it is an opportunity really for self-analysis, introspection. Yeah, so thank you. I'm glad that, thanks for not asking too hard a question, but it was an important one.
Yes, very, very good explanation. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Anyone else? Is anyone else trying to speak? Comments welcome. Anyone? So Winston, we may be coming to an end. Shamsundar Prabhu, do you speak to your plants?
Every single day, Prabhuji.
Yeah, it's got to be because, I picture you nurturing,
Yeah. I would like to share something that we talk about all the principles, what we need to do, everything is there, but this is my personal, maybe, it's not that everybody has to agree with it, but I felt one time that Goswami Maharaj told me, honey is the money. And then also one time I saw that when the people were putting the money in the donation box, Gurudev says that Krishna doesn't want how much you are putting the money, but how much you are keeping for yourself. I was dwelling on that point for more, and also looking the life of the devotees, particularly in Houston. What I found was that it's because we are so attached, and all our principle ultimately come about to become detached from the material things. And I think that we go and work if we can somehow or other convince ourselves. And that's why, sometime I have made the offer to some devotees, and I'll make the offer today also, that please become detached, because all these things we can work on it. But because we are earning, why can't we dedicate the fruit of the result? That will help tremendously. Krishna wants to see the dedication of our life. So if we take that step, all other things will fall in place so slowly and slowly. So I think today also I would like to offer that to all the devotees. Commit something and start giving some contributions. Purify your activity by giving the fruit of the results, fruit of your work. If after the end of the year, if you feel that it has not worked, we will return, and I will personally add some donation to you on top of that, returning the money. But please try that, because I have seen that if you try that, it becomes easy and easy. You want to increase more. Because when I read the sentence from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that unless and until our devotion becomes totally pure, with no tinge of any mix of Gyan or Aishwarya or anything like that, we will never be able to get out from the cycle of death and birth. So if we are really sincere, I feel personally myself, just by having that, because I have watched some devotees in Houston, I give a one-time class and I give that the nectar of instruction, first 4 verses. I give them a homework. And one person, he's very new person. Actually, he just started coming to the temple for maybe 6 months or something at that time. So he write a wonderful explanation. I said that please elaborate what you have understood by reading that, because we can read so many books, but important what you grasping in your life that you can implement. So this person, Yudhisthira Prabhu, he turned in the paper and he called my accountant that he wants to contribute 50% of his income. So accountant called me and he said, do you know that person? I said, yes. So I said, don't start his EFT. I'll talk to him personally and let me see where he is and what he really wants to do.
There's a story, not to cut you off,
Yeah.
maybe you can add a little bit, but Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so I think you got my point, what I was trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point. Burijan Prabhu is a senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada, told the story that when he moved to Australia and got a job, it was a little too much for him. He was in Japan by himself with his wife and supposedly starting the centers. And he just, we go through little ups and downs in our journey. And he moved to Australia. She was from Australia, and he worked, simple job. And he would mail, in those days, a check to Prabhupada each week in the mail to Los Angeles, where Prabhupada was spending time, $25 a week. But he would personally write a check. And he said his meditation was that Prabhupada owned the business that he was working in. So he was paying from his paycheck back to the owner. So that is absolutely, and the responsibility of the management of the different projects, that we might be inclined to give to, whether it's our local temple or whether it's, other types of activities in the community we live in, or whether it's a global enterprise that's spiritually based for our path, or, whatever we're inclined to do, whether it's Food for Life or cow protection or to schooling, right? Or whatever we're inclined to do. We also, the responsibility of the leadership is to manage it so well and be so transparent that people have faith. And that is very, very, very important also. And because that can be a stumbling block because people use that as an excuse. And I think it's a pretty good excuse. So very important that people know and everything's transparent also. And that's the responsibility of the leadership. So, all right, anyone else? Winston, it's your show.
I thought that was wonderful leadership. Probably thank you. I thought that was wonderful class, and thank you for presenting on that topic. I was actually just talking with my boss today because we're going through like a restructure. And sorry, can you hear me?
Now better, yeah.
Now better? Oh, okay. My laptop's over here. Yeah, I just thought everything was really relevant to a lot of things that have been going on at work. And today I had a conversation with my boss, who's she was announcing that there's going to be like a restructure and trying to smooth things over as as she gets promoted and other folks kind of like come in and take different positions within the org. And yeah, I mean, I think the volunteer, the spirit of the servant, is really key because typically during these times, people start to the sharks start to circle, and people start to get antsy, and start to jockey for position. And I've started to notice this, with some of my colleagues. And I'm thankful because I think this path, has really helped me to kind of take a step back and just say like, hey, just keep, doing the work that, I've been tasked with, and to, not just think about, what can I get from this situation or opportunity. Whereas before, I would actually, really try to act on some sort of ambition or something like that. So I noticed this change, actually just, these last couple of weeks, and that I've been, more detached and really just see myself in kind of like a, just kind of doing my duty and serving the team, but not really trying to, grab for more than is allotted to me. So I really appreciate the class. Thank you for presenting this.
And your service goes beyond that, Winston, because you've also touched other people and reached out and impacted other people's lives like my own.
Oh, Hare Krishna. Thanks, Jair. Thank you very much.
We want to see you better, Winston. You need to turn your light on brighter.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, my
smiley face too.
Oh, yeah. I think it might be this camera. I've got a new camera here that I don't know why the light's not working, but I'll try to adjust that for next time. Yeah, but thanks, Jagar. It's my pleasure, as Yudhisthira probably said. Hare Krishna.
Nicely done. All right. Do you have any general housekeeping or business that you want to share? And then.
Sure. So I think that concludes our program for tonight. Thanks again, everyone, for coming. And thanks again, Yudhishthira Prabhu, for a wonderful class. Next week, we'll be having Krishna Kripa Prabhu speak on the importance of reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which I think will also be a great topic. So we look forward to seeing you again next week, and hope you all have a safe and restful weekend. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you all very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.